Hey friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be me reviewing this book that's been out for a year now, and it's been long glaring at me from my shelf to get me to read it, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Lots of things to say, so let's just kind of get right into it, the nitty of gritty. So Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas is a YA urban fantasy following young Yadriel as he's trying to prove himself as a Brujo in his family. He came out pretty recently as trans. I believe it doesn't give a timeline specifically in the book, but he came out recently and his family is having a hard time seeing him as a Brujo. They only want to see him as the gender that he was born. He's trying to prove himself to be a real Brujo and be an actual part of the community. So right before Dia de los Muertos, he and his cousin Maritza go to the church and perform the ritual that solidifies him as a Brujo. And within that same night, his cousin Miguel is murdered and can't be found without a trace. Now, in an attempt to show that he's a Brujo to his family, he summons Miguel to see exactly what happened to him, only to accidentally summon the bad boy of the school, Julian. And now the two of them have to figure out exactly what happened to Julian and how that relates to Miguel and what exactly is happening. As for my first thoughts about this book, I heard a lot of good things. A lot of my friends rated it 5 out of 5 stars, but I did hear a handful of people who didn't enjoy it as much as they thought they were going to, and that kind of kept me from reading it. I wanted to read it right off the bat, but I think when I had it for Trick or Treat, I was moving, I believe. I want to say so. And then I got sick. So it just kind of got pushed back and further back until I finally picked it up over the summer. Which is a weird book to pick over the summer, I realize, but it's fine. Before I continue on with my actual thoughts of the book, let's kind of jump into some trigger warnings here, because there are quite a lot. There is death, there is murder, there is misgendering. There's a lot of misgendering in this book, so I highly make sure that you're ready if you are in the trans community and are not comfortable with misgendering or even dead naming. Though they never actually specifically drop Yadriel's dead name in the book, it is mentioned that they do call him by his dead name a few times. I'm thankful that that was never actually brought up in the book, but still lots of misgendering, handfuls of dead naming, which again, I understand where Aiden was coming from, but I do think that amount might have been a little harmful. Homophobia, transphobia, and then mentions of child abuse and violence. Moving on to the only 3 things that I didn't like. The first thing is that I found that the big reveal at the end was pretty easy to notice. There was a particular scene in the book itself that makes it pretty obvious who did it and why they were doing it. You could say and lie to yourself that it wasn't that person, which I kind of did for a little bit, but at some point it just the build-up was just smacking you in the face and you kind of figured it out right off the bat. You probably would figure it out early on in the book even without that huge scene in there, but I feel like it was just kind of a big throwaway, and I wish there was a little bit more of back and forth in terms of telling us hinting at and telling us who this person might be who was causing this. There could have been a lot more red herrings in this book than we were given, which is unfortunate. I also felt like that the elements to the big bad moment, the literal elements that were making the big bad moment, were just basically just glazed over in the book. They were mentioned once or twice and then never necessarily brought back up again. So the problem with that is that when it was brought up during the big bad moment, I was like, well, how are these so important? Why are these so important? Why wasn't this given more weight when it happened? And it didn't make sense to just bring it up now instead of bringing it up before, if that, you know? And lastly, the thing that I didn't like is that I feel like I wanted Maritza to play a bigger role in the book. She started off as one of Yadriel's only supporters, only helpers, and then by the end of it, she kind of turned into just backup. She was there to provide covers for Yad when he was doing things he wasn't supposed to be doing. She was there to just be a literal go Yadriel and Julian, get together kind of voice by the end of it, which is really disappointing, because it would have been nice to have her voice being one of another outcast in this book, but you know, it is what it is, I guess. Moving right along to the things that I did like, I really did like the Hispanic culture in this. Yadriel is Mexican and Colombian, so we got to see that little blend of those two cultures come together in this book during one of the most important holidays in the Hispanic culture, which is Dia de los Muertos. Everything was so normalized for that culture. There was like nothing was italicized. I felt like even in terms of like the things that was being explained to us, and explained because not every reader understands what's going on, it didn't feel like it was explaining it because they knew that the author knew it had to be explained, that it was just a natural progression, a natural explanation. I mean, Julian, who isn't as engrossed in his Hispanic, I think he's Mexican, his Mexican culture, his Mexican heritage, was kind of that vessel to learn these things through, which is great, because it felt more of a natural occurrence rather than being like in a long description explaining the history behind Dia de los Muertos, the history behind the family, the history behind their magic. So it just made sense to have him as a vessel to learn these things through, and it felt so natural and not forced in the slightest. Oh yeah, Aiden themselves is on the trans spectrum. I believe they are non-binary, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. I'm not caught up with Aiden's in the slightest, so I don't know how much that has changed since this book came out. So everything about it was just so ingrained in transness. We got to see Yadriel questioning the very like gender-specific language that Spanish typically is. We got to feel every single slap, every single heartbreaking moment that Yadriel felt when his father just refused to listen to him, refused to accept him as a brujo in a heated moments, not saying it was correct for him to do so, ended up using the wrong pronouns, dead naming him, and struggled to find a way to apologize. Another note that I really did enjoy was that I liked that his family it wasn't as if they hated him and wanted him to say a certain way. It was very obvious that it's just a family who, boys, Sherman, thank you. It was very obvious that it was just a family who did not understand this part of the community, who was trying to in their own way and didn't mean harm by it. They were just trying their best. And sometimes, you know, the best that you can do isn't the best for the person that you're trying for. Sometimes you have to go above and beyond that, and I really enjoyed that. It wasn't malicious. They loved him exactly for who he is, but struggled with the fact that he wasn't what his final form, I suppose, wasn't exactly what they envisioned it to be when he, you know, popped out of his mama's womb. I also love the fact that his mom was such a supporter of him. She is not alive in this book, unfortunately, but we got to see so many layers of this woman. Well, she's in the book, but not in the book. We got to see so many layers of this woman, and just the amount of love that Yadriel and his father had for her, and it was just so moving and so amazing to see like a supportive woman or a supportive parent in like a very strange thing for her to traverse through, since again Hispanic language in itself is very gendered, and then to boot the whole like machismo thing and like, you know, just the very gendered constructs within this culture that I have seen from, you know, growing up around people who are Hispanic. This book, my last favorite thing about this book is that I loved Julian and Yadriel. It was their relationship was so heartwarming. They just kind of accepted each other at face value without any questions and fell in love, and it was just such a sweet and heartwarming book to read. I just adored every single bit of their relationship and seeing them progress. I was giggling, I was crying, I was like, by the end of this book I was like near in tears. It was just like it was the exact heartwarming book that I needed at the moment, and I'm so glad I got to read it, because it's read their relationship, because it was so good. It was so good. Moving on to my overall thoughts and my rating, I would recommend this. It's such a heartwarming read, and it does like have this beautiful blend of like queerness and Hispanic culture, and it just blends so beautifully together that Aiden Thomas really took time with planning out every single detail, from the magic system to the history to Yadriel's own very being, and it was so good. I do say that I will put a bit of a pause on it if you are, say, like newly come out as trans or non-binary and are struggling with family and friends having to accept like those pronouns, the occasional dead naming, or maybe if you're just not quite ready to explore that part of you, if if it brings up bad memories, or that history, that past, if it brings up bad memories still, I would put a pause on it, because even I was taken aback. Like, I was very much like, there's so much misgendering in this book. I can't, like, literally, but I think I was reading this book during a live, and I mentioned it, that like the first like good chunk of this book was something just about misgendering, and it was just so jarring, which was the whole point. But again, if you're not in that mindset, I'd rather you not read the book and protect yourself for right now. Other than that, I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. This is probably going to be a new favorite of mine, if not a favorite of the year. We'll see how the rest of the year goes out. We're only halfway through it, so we'll find out. But that is it for my review of Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. If you guys like these kind of reviews, I'm so sorry for not reading this book when it first came out. But if you guys like this kind of reviews and want me to do more, I do try to do these about like once a month. Hopefully I'll get back to my bi-weekly schedule and be able to have like more than 4 or 5 videos a month, but we'll see how I feel in July. But if you guys want me to do more of these, let me know in the comments what books you would like to see. And until next time, hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and hopefully your week is better for you. Bye.